Coming up on 5 Minute News. Renewed calls for gun control after shooting at Michigan State University. Rescues continue as Turkey's death toll passes 41,000. And expect mass exodus on biblical scale, warns UN chief. It's Wednesday, February 15. I'm Anthony Davis. The gunman who killed 3 Michigan State University students and wounded 5 others before taking his own life had a history of mental illness and carried a note in his pocket indicating a threat to 2 New Jersey schools. The disclosure of an apparent New Jersey connection to the suspect, 43-year-old Anthony Dwayne McRae, came as investigators sought clues to what prompted him to open fire on Monday night on the MSU campus in East Lansing, about 90 miles west of Detroit. McRae, who lived in the adjacent city of Lansing, Michigan, the state capital, had no known affiliation to the university or associations to any of his victims, police said. "We have no idea why he came to campus to do this," Chris Rosman, interim deputy chief of MSU police, told reporters early on Tuesday, hours after the shooting at an academic hall and nearby student union building. A neighbor of McRae's described him as a real hellraiser who often fired his gun at home. The shooting began at 8:30 p.m. local time, and the entire campus and surrounding neighborhoods were placed under a security lockdown while police searched door to door for the gunman. The manhunt ended about 3 hours later in Lansing, where McRae shot himself to death. Last year, there were 647 mass shootings. In the first 7 weeks of 2023, 67. No other country in the world has mass shootings on this scale. On Tuesday, the anniversary of the Parkland shooting, President Joe Biden reiterated his plea for a ban on semi-automatic assault rifles. 9 survivors were rescued from the rubble in Turkey on Tuesday, more than a week after a massive earthquake struck, as the focus of the aid effort shifted to helping people now struggling without shelter or enough food in the bitter cold. The disaster, with a combined death toll in Turkey and neighboring Syria exceeding 41,000, has ravaged cities in both countries, leaving many survivors homeless in near-freezing winter temperatures. Turkish President Erdogan has acknowledged problems in the initial response to the 17.8 magnitude quake that struck early on February 6, but has said the situation is now under control. "We are facing one of the greatest natural disasters, not only in our country but also in the history of humanity," Erdogan said in a televised speech in Ankara. Those rescued yesterday included 2 brothers aged 17 and 21 pulled from an apartment block, and a Syrian man and young woman rescued after 200 hours in the rubble. "There could be further people alive still to find," said one rescuer. But UN authorities have said the rescue phase is coming to a close, with the focus turning to shelter, food and schooling. "The needs are huge, increasing by the hour," said the World Health Organization's Director for Europe. Some 26 million people across both countries need humanitarian assistance. There's also growing concern over emerging health issues linked to the cold weather, hygiene and sanitation, and the spread of infectious diseases, with vulnerable people especially at risk. An increase in the pace at which sea levels are rising threatens a mass exodus of entire populations on a biblical scale, the UN General Secretary has warned. The climate crisis is causing sea levels to rise faster than for 3,000 years, bringing a torrent of trouble to almost 1 billion people, from London to Los Angeles and Bangkok to Buenos Aires, Antonio Guterres said on Tuesday. Some nations could cease to exist, drowned under the waves, he said. Addressing the UN Security Council, Guterres said slashing carbon emissions, addressing problems such as poverty that worsen the impact of the rising seas on communities, and developing new international laws to protect those made homeless and even stateless were all needed. He said sea level rise was a threat multiplier, which, by damaging lives, economies and infrastructure, had dramatic implications for global peace and security. Significant sea level rise is already inevitable with current levels of global heating, but the consequences of failing to tackle the problem are unthinkable. Guterres said low-lying communities and entire countries could disappear forever. We would witness a mass exodus of entire populations on a biblical scale, and we would see ever fiercer competition for fresh water, land, and other resources. People's human rights do not disappear because their homes do, he said. Yes, this means international refugee law. The International Law Commission is assessing the legal situation. In 2020, the UN Human Rights Committee ruled that it was unlawful for governments to return people to countries where their lives might be threatened by the climate crisis. A new compilation of data from the World Meteorological Organization shows that sea levels are rising fast, and the global ocean has warmed faster over the past century than at any time in the past 11,000 years. You can subscribe to 5 Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5 Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5 Minute News is an Evergreen podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.